The year was 2001. It was late fall. The leaves had all changed color, with the reds, oranges, and yellows. The leaves were no longer green. Temperature was cooling down. Everything was getting a bit more quiet. I went outside. I walked to my porch. It was a bit cool out today. Off in the distance and around me, I could see a little bit of fog. Not too much, but it was there. It was early morning time. The temperature was slightly starting to warm up as the day passed by. Where I lived at the moment was out pretty much in the middle of nowhere. I lived in the country, far away from people. The closest neighbor lived several miles away at least. I went out to the woods for a walk. I had to pick up some wood. I had to chop some wood to use for our fireplace to keep us warm. I looked around at different ones that I could split to use as firewood. Some of the wood was a bit damp, wet, so I couldn't really use it for burning. That had to dry out. Back at the house, I had a pile of wood covered with tarp so that it can keep the dampness and the rain off of it. I kept looking around, trying to find more wood to split. Most of the logs were rotted, falling apart, and sometimes I would turn a log over and find different bugs, insects, and sometimes even spiders, centipedes, millipedes. I kept looking, and the few I did find was very hard wood that was extremely hard to split. It took several chops to cut it in half to where I could manage to get it to the proper size to fit into the fireplace. I carried them with me many trips back to the house. I didn't have a wheelbarrow or anything at the time to place them in to make this an easier job with less trips, but I managed with what I had. My feet were a bit cold. The shoes I was wearing were not very well insulated. The dampness of the ground got into my shoes and into my socks. My socks soaked up this dampness and made my feet colder. There were several holes in my shoes, so the water was able to get in. As I walked through the leaves and the dampness of the forest, my feet were cold, but I kept moving so that my feet would stay warm. My hands were cold, but I kept moving to keep my hands nice and warm. I had on with me a thin coat, some jeans, and I didn't have any gloves at the moment, although that would have been more convenient and comfortable carrying around all these logs. I kept looking around. The ground was covered with leaves from all the leaves that fell off the trees during the fall time. The leaves were built up in a thick layer in the forest. It was very quiet. There wasn't much sounds or anything around me. Off in the distance I heard some cows mooing, and where I lived at the time, I was surrounded by pastures and forest. So there were some cattle and wildlife around me, and sometimes in the woods I would hear different animals and birds chirping. But this day there wasn't very many birds chirping. It was a quiet, foggy, and cool day. I kept looking for more firewood that I could use to bring back to the house. I found several. I piled them up, covered them with a tarp to keep them from getting wetter, so I can bring them in the house to use as firewood. Thank you all for listening, and I will see you in the next video.